Welcome to Cruisin Times TV. I'm John Shapiro, and we're in the clubhouse here at Cruisin Times Magazine, but we just videotaped a very interesting little trivia question, if anybody ever asks you, where did the term USA1, as in the Chevy commercials, come from? Well, it came from a famous funny car driver, Bruce Larson. You remember him, Bruce Larson's USA1 funny car? Well, to kind of shake your mind up a little bit, there's a picture of it back in the late 60s, early 70s. Anyway, we visited Bruce Larson's museum, drag fest, open house in Cruisin, just outside of Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. And I'm telling you, from the looks of these pictures that we're showing right now, these cruisers came in from all over the place. Where are they parking? In his neighborhood. This is outside his barn, outside his house, in a small subdivision. This is not like the big dollar John Force stuff. Sorry, John. But I'll tell you what he does for a living, too, by the way, while we watch the cars come in. He sells lightning rods for barns. I mean, who'd thunk? Somebody's got to sell them. You can't get them at Kmart. But people park all over the subdivision. Down this one cul-de-sac is where the dragsters the dragster drivers park their trailers. And everybody comes over, and they all go through his museum, and they all look around the cars, and they've got a food vendor truck. Williams Catering was there. We'll show you some of the great food they have. We're also going to show you inside his barn, which he used as his actual area when he did his funny cars and did all his maintenance on his cars and his engines. And he's been match racing. He was probably one of the first funny car drivers to jump on the bandwagon called funny cars back in late 60s. And into the early 70s, and of course, then won championships in the 80s. But here's a picture of his 32 Chevy coupe. I know it looks like a Ford. It's got a Ford Deuce grill on it, but it's a Chevy. Fuel-injected Olds. Ran A-gas back in the 60s. I believe this was his first drag car. It's called Mr. Clean, and it's unchopped. That's how clean this thing is, and it's painted, and it is beautiful. Of course, safety features, moon discs on the side, white wall slicks. I mean, you've got it all. Holes drilled in the back for less weight. It was sponsored by Miller's Mobile out of Camp Hill, PA, which is right down the road. And notice the taillights, those are stock Chevy ones. By the way, they were not custom built, but it's unchopped, beautiful looking lines. Here's some custom cars that came in. That Merc, this nice looking stock T-Bird, looks like the one that was in American Graffiti. This is one of Bruce's cars. It's a custom rod Deuce pickup. Notice the exhaust that comes up and out and over by the pickup bed. But got flipper spinner caps, which we all used back then instead of mag wheels because you couldn't afford them. You go to a junkyard and get them, but this one's it's Cadillac Rose. It's chopped and channeled. Here's a great looking, it's a 33 Ford fuel altered. It's got a 572 big block in it, and it's owned by Steve Sachs. It's called the Hellcat Fuel Altered out of Sellersville, Pennsylvania, and grabbed all the attention. Flame paint job on black paint. Just a beautiful looking car. I mean, I could win show trophies for crying out loud. Coming out of the box is a famous top fuel car. I'm going to give you a chance to guess this. Ran back in the 60s, obviously. But this is they're having a little problem getting it out, a little too low. They need some wood, and they'll get that. Owner happens to be the guy on the left. His name is Brian Beatty. I hope I pronounced that right, Brian. But him and his son Rob restored this after they took about 5-year project. And this is, wait till it gets out a little bit more, but I tell you, this is the former, if you haven't guessed yet, it's the former Jim and Allison Lee's Great Expectation top fuel car. And there you get a little bit better look at it with a full body on it. And this was, as I said, 5 years. They've replaced just about certain items were replaced, couldn't find them, but about 80-90% original. Now it's called Great Expectations 2. Sits on a Don Long chassis, and they hail out of Macungie, Pennsylvania, which those who've never heard of Macungie, they got a really big rod and custom show out of there. But anyway, this is a nice looking car. Totally restored. Check this out. Chrome rear end. I mean, not too many people go to the extent to do that, but Brian and his son Rob have, and artwork is great. It runs in a cackle fest, and this just great looking. A lot of other cars too, competition coupes. blown. Just regular dragsters came. This nice little Honest Charlie decal on the side there. This gives you a view of what it looks like inside. But great looking cars, a whole string of cars from up and down the East Coast come every year for Bruce Larson's Drag Fest. And one car that we discovered, we still haven't gotten the history on it, but we're going to show you right here. It's a former, it's a small block injected dragster, owned by, we don't know who owns it, that's the problem, but it was called the Pennsylvania Dutchman, and beautiful restoration. The cool thing about, someone told me, he said, look at that fire suit. You could get in that and then just take a nap, and everybody would think you're a mannequin, and they never bother you. Anyway, inside Bruce Larson's barn is his museum of funny cars. Of course, we're looking at him right now, and he's got more memorabilia. He must have collected. He's one of these guys that never throws away anything. You get something, you get a decal, you get a poster, magazine, he puts it on the wall. And a lot of people gave him stuff too as well. But this is just a great look at the 70s and 80s funny cars. Here's when he changed to Oldsmobile, the Century sponsor. This, of course, was a little trick photography there. That's a wall art, hanging on your wall. I mean, here's another body hanging. Would you love to have this in your basement? You have to have a pretty good-sized basement. This is just great stuff. As he was the champion back in '89, Winston champion, ran that for a Century sponsorship. But everything is on the wall. Pictures, even his NASCAR, he doesn't care. Hey, whatever it is. But he's got magazines. He's got shirts, signed, hats, trophies, just everything, which is cool to go back and look at. There's stuff. I remember he was on Superstock magazine, on the cover of that. He was on half a dozen other magazines probably. But here it is right here, Superstock. There's his Wallies. He's got a whole case full of those, and he started off match racing, as I said, and eventually, much like John Force, just kept at it, and then became a star. And then became. Here's some cool stuff. If you were looking for pictures of famous old drag racers and drag cars, they got guys selling photos in here. They had the foresight back when they were 16 years old to not only take those pictures but keep them. And they've blown them up to 8x10s. Here's a double-engine flathead rail. But they kept those. That's just, I couldn't find any of the pictures that I took. But, and we got the food portion. This I'd like to invent. So just like you heard it here, smell-o-vision. Can't you smell that? You can hear it. But you can smell those onions and peppers cooking. Real good bratwurst and hamburgers and hot dogs put on by the Williams Catering, and I went by there and you couldn't help it. I had to shoot this, and there every year you'll see a portion where they're stuck there right by their neighbor's driveway. This is a great old custom car. I'll give you a hint: George Barris, Sam Barris. Do you remember this? Well, if you said copper cart, you would be correct. You're also old enough to know these things. This was a truck that they used. George campaigned this across the U.S. during the winter months, and it would end up at every indoor car show armory, and it was designed to show the custom treatments that Barris could do, Sam and George, and everything is chopped, channeled, sectioned. Look at the interior. French antennas. They had a lot of storage under the car. Actually, the seat's pretty high. They got a storage area there. Special Lakes pipes, copper paint. It's a pearl and copper paint. The tonneau cover is just very unique. It just folds back over the top, and special handmade custom taillights. And that's what toured all over the place, made all the magazines, all the little books back then when we used to have those little books. Remember, you stick them between your geography books so the teacher would not know what you weren't studying. But that's a look at the copper cart. It might be a clone, but still you got to appreciate it. It's pretty cool. And it was in the Cleveland Autorama a couple years ago, I believe. this is just his lawn, and we're talking hundreds of cars, cruisers, neighborhood. You'll see the neighborhood just on the other side of this. There's a house on that side. This is actually, you'll see his barn here shortly. But these guys come from not only, as I said, he's near Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, but they'll come from the East Coast. I mean, they're in Maryland, Virginia, and guys from Ohio came up, a couple of boys from Pittsburgh area. But just park on the grass. They dress warm. You see jackets, sweatshirts. You can see the neighborhood houses. They just love it. They've been doing it for years. Here's the latest Camaro funny car that Bruce is going to be working on this winter. Should be due out summer of 2015. And I would imagine that 32 Chevy Coupe will be pulling it. So make it a point to come here next year in November.